Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from March 1st, 1866. So, this should not be a surprise. I am continuing my series on the Juvenile Instructor. And let's just take a look. I'm not sure what this one's about. So, Poetry. The Stars by E.R. Snow. Children, look at the stars when they're shining bright in the clear blue sky on a cloudless night. Little lamps by the million, how pretty they are. Can you tell me who placed them and keeps them there? When the curtain of clouds is rolled away, you may see this grand tableau without any pay, but a tribute of praise is their maker due, not only from parents, but children too. 'Tis because they are off in the distance so far, that those beautiful lamps appear small, but each star is as large as a world. Then how far they must be! It is millions of miles to each star that you see. Okay. Do you think of a hand that can reach up so high as to fasten those lamps so far up in the sky? The great God placed them there. He's our Father too, and he sees little children and sees what they do. Does the morning sun drive the stars away? No, but stars are not seen but by the light of day. And now, children, remember, the night reveals many beautiful things that the day conceals. Think of this when in life's future path you move, and think too that the lights always shine from above. And if darkness should ever your steps surround, be sure to look up where the stars can be found. Our good Father who made the stars and sky has beautiful palaces built on high, and for all good children who seek to do his will he has lovely mansions too. Oh, how great and how wise that God must be, and how good to remember you and me. He loves all the good, and when good people die, they all go to those bright, happy homes on high. Well, like, they're right and they're wrong, yeah? Like, it's interesting that they're saying, Eliza R. Snow is saying that they are as large as a world. Okay, most stars are significantly larger than a world. Most planets are much smaller than the stars. Much smaller than the stars. So, like, calling it as large as a world is actually an understatement. And also another one is millions of miles to each star that you see. It's much more than millions of miles. Like, oh gosh, like they're light years away. Like that's so much more than 1,000,000 miles. Alexa, how far is a light year in miles?
1 light year is about 5.88 trillion miles.
So yeah, that's 5.88 trillion miles is a single light year. And I understand that the closest star is Alpha Centauri, which is, like, I think 4 light years. Alexa, how many light years away is the star Alpha Centauri?
Alpha Centauri is 25.69 trillion miles from Earth.
25.69 trillion miles from Earth. That is significantly more than millions of miles away. I'm just saying, like, this is way an understatement. And so did they actually think that then, or was Eliza R. Snow just misinformed? Maybe she's trying to make it more comprehensible by calling it as big as a world and millions of miles away, but it's so much more than that. Like, it's so much more than that. We're talking on the, like, 1,000 times more than that, like 1,000,000 times more than that. Yeah. Like, I'm not kidding. So, I do like when it's like, if it's dark out, look up. I do like that because also people who are very skilled at navigating with the stars can use them to find their way. I personally don't think I could, but it would tell me which way is north. I can usually find the Big Dipper, yeah? And then pick out the North Star, which is very helpful, yeah? Yeah. Anyways, a little bit of an understatement. Yeah, I guess it's not scientific. It's more like religious, but yeah. It's okay. It's just not accurate, that's all. All right, moving on. Biography, Joseph Smith the prophet, continued. The plates which the angel gave to Joseph were not far from 8 inches wide, and were not quite as thick as common tin. The writing or engraving was on both sides, and was small and beautifully written. They were fastened together in the form of a book by 3 rings running through the edges of all the leaves or plates. The volume was nearly 6 inches thick, and part of it was sealed so that Joseph could not read or translate it. This part which was sealed has not been translated, but the Lord has promised that he will give to his people when the proper time arrives. But we cannot expect he will reveal more to us if we neglect that which he has already given to us. Yeah, that's a good point. When the heavenly messenger, whose name was Moroni, the same prophet who had buried them, delivered the plates up to Joseph, he charged him that he should be responsible for them. He told him that he should be cut off if he let them get out of his hands through carelessness or neglect, but if he would do his best to take care of them until he should call for them, they should be protected. There were good reasons for giving Joseph such strong charges to keep the plates safe, for as soon as it became known that he had them, men tried in every way to get them from him. After having obtained them and while carrying them home, 2 men who had hid themselves for the purpose of robbing him of the plates attacked him. Before Joseph saw them, one of them struck him with a club, but Joseph could not be handled very easily. He was 21 years old, and he was a large man, and very strong and active, and he succeeded in getting away from them. They chased him until they came near to his father's house, when they left him, very much disappointed, no doubt, that they had not got the plates. His life was in continual danger from the wicked. Mobs frequently surrounded his house and tried to injure him. He was shot at several times, but he escaped. They tried in every way they could think of to get hold of the plates, and were continually telling all manner of lies about Joseph. Being in danger of his life from those wicked people when he was then living, he resolved to move into the state of Pennsylvania, where his wife's parents resided. Joseph, when he was about 20 years old, had been employed by a man to go into Pennsylvania to work for him, and while there he boarded with a Mr. Hale. He became acquainted with Emma Hale, the daughter of Mr. Hale, and he afterwards married her. When Joseph started for Pennsylvania, he hid the plates in a barrel of beans in his wagon. He had not gone far before an officer overtook him with a search warrant. A search warrant is a paper which a justice of the peace makes out to give a policeman or constable authority to search for stolen goods through the house or among the things of any person who may be suspected of stealing. Joseph had not taken anything that belonged to anybody else, and these wicked men knew that he had not, but the devil prompted them to try in this way to get hold of the plates. The officer searched the wagon very carefully, but he could not find what he wanted, at which he was very much disappointed. After this officer went back, another officer followed, and he also searched the wagon, but was no more successful than the first one was. Boys, you can see by reading this how many difficulties Joseph had to meet with to accomplish what the Lord had commanded him to perform. Many men, if they had been shot at and mobbed and called all manner of evil names, as Joseph had been, would have been so frightened that they would have given up and not tried to do what the Lord required. But this was not the case with Joseph. He loved God, and he loved the truth, and he had faith in God and in his power to deliver him. He was as bold as a lion, and the world could not make him ashamed of the truth or afraid to declare it. Opposition did not scare him, for he knew that the Lord had power to carry on his work and to bring him off triumphantly. After reaching Pennsylvania, Joseph commenced copying the writing which was on the plates, and by the aid of the Urim and Thummim, he translated them. In February 1825, I think, is what that says, a gentleman by the name of Martin Harris came to see Joseph. He had before that assisted Joseph with means to move from New York to Pennsylvania. He took the characters which Joseph had drawn off and the translation of some of them and started with them to the city of New York. When he reached that city, he took them to a gentleman who was widely known for his learning, a Professor Charles Anton, who gave him a certificate that they were true characters and that the translation was correct. And when he was told that Joseph had the plates revealed to him by an angel of God, he took the certificate and tore it up, saying there was no such thing now as angels coming to men. He also told Martin Harris that if he would bring the plates to him, he could translate them. He told him that he was forbidden to bring them, and that part of the plates was sealed. Mr. Anton replied, "I cannot read a sealed book." He also took them to Dr. Mitchell, who agreed with what Professor Anton had said. If our little readers will look in their Bibles and find the 29th chapter of Isaiah and the 11th and to the 14th verses, they will see that the Lord had predicted about this through the prophet Isaiah about 2,500 years before it came to pass. To be continued. Okay, not all of this was in Joseph Smith history. The last part was about Professor Anton and the like the getting of the plates, yes, but not about the details. I did not actually know the story of him hiding them in a barrel of beans, although that is pretty clever. Yeah, because you could put the beans all over it, like below it, around it, over top of it, and it would hide it really, really well. Plus, beans are quite heavy, although it would feel heavier than a normal barrel of beans. But I'm not sure that anybody would notice that, like if they were inspecting it manually. They'd open it up, look inside, and be like, oh, that's a barrel of beans, and then put the top back on, I think that was a pretty clever thing to do. I am glad that it worked. But yeah, I also knew the story about him meeting Emma because he had worked in Pennsylvania, and that's where he met Emma in Harmony. Yeah. Anyways, so it sounds pretty accurate to me. I think that, I think that we're kind of at the end of Joseph Smith history as it is in the Pearl of Great Price, and we will probably next time move on to new stories that maybe I don't know as well. Yeah, not quite as familiar with. Cool, looking forward to it. All right, the story of Atlas. Many of my little friends will no doubt think that the above picture is a very strange one. It represents a man kneeling in the midst of high mountains, almost crushed to the ground by a great globe or ball resting on his shoulders. Perhaps you would like to know who he is and what he is doing. His name is Atlas, and the large globe on his shoulders is meant for the world on which we live. The people who dwelt on the earth a few thousand years ago had no printing presses, but the old people used to tell the young ones that they had heard about things which took place before their day, and thus historical tales were handed down for hundreds of years. This is called tradition. Now these tales, from being told so often as people seldom tell a tale exactly as they hear it, soon had a great amount of error and falsehood mixed up with the truth, and when we read many of them now, we can scarcely tell what part of them is true and what is false. The story of Atlas runs thus. About the time that Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt to the land of promise, a king reigned over a very large country to the northwestern coast of Africa called Mauritania. Okay, I know where Mauritania is. A very large country on the northwestern coast of Africa. That is not where it is. But, okay. Mauritania is an island in the Indian Ocean. Okay, moving on. If you will look on a map of Africa, you will find two countries called Morocco and Fez. There used to be a country called Fez? Okay, I will Google that in a moment. These are part of King Atlas's ancient kingdom. It is said he was a very learned man for those times and first taught his people astronomy, and also that the earth was round like a ball or orange, just the same as the sun or moon. But this time, most of the inhabitants of the world thought that the earth was a large flat plain, but it is now known to be like a ball, for men have sailed around it in ships. The old traditionary story says that Atlas was changed into a range of mountains, which of course is not true, though there is a range of mountains which still bears his name in the kingdom over which he ruled. Now, will my little friends try to remember when they see a picture of a man with a world on his back that it represents Atlas, who the Gentiles think first taught that the world was round, and to keep this in remembrance, he is represented with a globe on his shoulders. But many of the servants of God knew that the world was round long before Atlas was born. Will they also remember that the Atlas Mountains are named after them? A book containing maps of the world and its countries is also called an atlas for the same reason. That's really interesting. I am going to Google it really quickly because while some of that I think is very obviously true, true as far as legends go, but is like some of it I'm not as familiar with. So first things first, let's look at Mauritania. Oh, I was thinking Mauritius. Okay, sorry, my bad for all Mauritanians listening, because I completely messed that up. My bad, I apologize. So, I can admit when I'm wrong. Mauritania is in Africa, it is quite close to Morocco. Sorry. So, Mauritania, northwestern Africa. I'm sorry. So much for being good at geography. Okay. It's okay. There is a mountain range that goes through it, but what was the other name of the other country they were talking about, which is now Morocco, and Fez. Fez. Fez is a hat, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to look up country of Fez. Northern Morocco. Okay. It's a city, northern Morocco, in the west, on the Wadi Fez, just above an influx of the Cebu River. The oldest of Morocco's 4 imperial cities, it was founded on the banks of the Wadi Fez by Idris I, East Bank about 789, and Idris II, West Bank about 809. Okay, I did not know that. So, all right, I apologize for getting things wrong. I do find that interesting, the story of Atlas. Also, that books of maps are called Atlas for this reason, and he was an actual person, I think is also very interesting. All right, moving on. Little folks' prayers. We asked a little boy the other day if he said his prayers every night and morning unto the Lord. He told us that he prayed every night before he went to bed, but he did not in the morning. This little boy may have thought that he only wanted the Lord to take care of him while he was asleep and could not see anything, and that when he was awake he could take care of himself. Now this would be a very foolish thought for anybody to have. The Lord has to watch over us by day as well as by night, to keep us from harm. Everybody may meet with danger and sickness in the daytime as much as by night. The little folks who read this paper should not, therefore, be like this little boy in this respect, but should always pray to the Lord at night, before they go to bed, and before they get too sleepy to pray, and also in the morning before they commence to play or attend to anything they may have to do. You never forget to eat your breakfast before you go to school, nor to eat your supper before you go to bed, do you, children? And if you pray regularly night and morning to the Lord, you will soon find that your spirits are fed by so doing, as much as your bodies are by eating. If you do this when you are young, it will become a habit with you, and you will feel very bad when you do not attend to it, just as much as you would if you were to go without eating your breakfast or supper. God loves little children, and when they call upon him, he listens to their prayers, and he draws near unto them. But if they never pray to him, or only pray once in a while, he is not very close to them. And if they should get into trouble, or want anything, or call upon him for it, they may have to call some time before he will answer them. We have known boys to be sent out to hunt stock on the range, who were in the habit of praying to the Lord. Sometimes they could not find the animal they wanted, and they would kneel down and ask the Lord to help them. He would lead them to where the animal was, or lead the animal to meet them. This is an easy thing for the Lord to do when we ask him in faith. We knew a little boy whose father had taught him to pray to the Lord for whatever he wanted. One day he lost something that he prized very highly, and after hunting it for some time he could not find it. Just then he thought of what his father had told him about praying to the Lord. He was by himself at the time, and he knelt right down and asked the Lord to help him to find what he had lost. As he rose from his knees, he looked around him and soon spied the article he was looking for. This pleased him so much that he had to tell his father about the Lord answering his prayer. Children, when you are not alone, you can still pray to the Lord for what you want. You can pray in your hearts. Yeah, 100%. I do appreciate this, and I think this is good advice. Don't forget to pray if you are a religious person and you would like the help of your Heavenly Father, and just to tell him what is going on in your life. He wants to know, yeah? All right, a Swiss family. There is no country in Europe that presents such attractions to the tourists as Switzerland, or the land of William Tell, as it is often called. Its mountains, its valleys, and its lakes are pictured in every country in the world. Seriously? And its history is replete with interest to every student. It is a beautiful country, and its inhabitants in the mountains, where they have little intercourse with strangers, are honest, frugal, and industrious, and come nearer in social customs to the inhabitants of Utah than do any people we know of. Okay. They produce their own clothing, indeed everything they wear and use, and seldom purchase the fine clothes and use of the luxuries that are so common in the cities. They are very temperate in their habits, and though they commonly use wine at table, it is of their own manufacture, free from adulterated materials, and rarely is any person intoxicated. There are many excellent traits of character in the Swiss, but none so marked as that of industry. They are a working people, and that is a great virtue. The picture presented here before the young readers is that of a mountaineer with his family and goats ascending to the high valleys where every spring they go to herd and make choice cheese. One glance at the picture readily recalls to the recollection of the writer that he is often seen in that country The mule is quiet and docile, bearing the churns and other vessels used in the dairy, while the little boy with his horn calls the goats to follow. The herd boy there is kind to the goats committed to his charge, and they know his call and answer it with a great readiness as good children answer to the call of their parents. The whole of the subject, the artist's pencil here are faithfully represented. It is a family group, for in the reality a very peaceable mule and the frisky goats are as much members of this mountaineer's family as his little boys, for in many of the chalets, as they call their mountain shanties, they all seek shelter together from the storms of the day or the chilling air of nights. TBHS. Yeah? This is really interesting to me. Like, holding up this, like, country, a whole country, as, like, good examples. Like, you can hold up people as good examples, that's fine. But an entire country is a bit much, don't you think? I am sure not everyone in the country is like this. I am sure that there are some people like this, and that is true of any country. Any country will have its good, kind, pure-hearted people, and will have its bad people who are, not so great. I also like that they called it the land of William Tell, and also that it's like a super big tourist attraction. I don't really think of Switzerland as a tourist attraction. Yes, it has parts of it that I would love to visit and be a tourist in. However, the entire country is a tourist attraction. I mean, in that case, any country could be a tourist attraction. There are parts of every country that I would say is interesting for tourists. Australia is a tourist attraction. Yeah. Mauritania, apparently. Now that I know where it is, I would love to visit it just to look around and see what there's to see. Switzerland, yes, absolutely on my list. It's not the only country on my list, yes. And it's not even the one that's like on the highest priority, I'm just saying, sure, I'd love to see Switzerland, and I'd love to see lots of places, so that's a little interesting. Huh. Alright, little filler here. It's a waste of time to complain of other people's faults. The best thing we can do is mend our own. Yeah, it's a true story, yeah. When the well is dry, we learn the worth of water. A misspent life brings shame, regret, and sorrow. Well, that's also not wrong, yeah? You don't think of not having air until you don't have it, yeah? The mind makes the man. Well, to a certain extent. All right, the Jews. So far, these stories have been about Bible stories, and that is appropriate to a certain extent. It is not talking, however, about the culture of a people, which is more what I was expecting, but hey. So let's learn more about Bible stories. Let's see what we're going to get into today. The people of Egypt did not like shepherds at the time when Jacob and his family went down to that land. The reason of this was that Egypt had been overrun at one time and conquered by a people who were shepherds from a country called Phoenicia. And these shepherds that ruled over the Egyptians for a long time, keeping them in a state of slavery. Jacob had been living in a country called Canaan, which you will find on a map of Asia bearing the name of Palestine, and a part of Asia Minor or Lesser Asia. The people of Canaan had many flocks and herds, and therefore were nearly all shepherds. When the king of Egypt found out that Joseph's father and brethren were shepherds, he gave them the land of them to live in. Which was the most fertile part of the land. Here they grew and prospered exceedingly for many years, while both Jacob and Joseph lived and after they died. But when a great many years had passed away, a king reigned over Egypt who oppressed the Jews, or Hebrews as they were then called, and laid heavy burdens on them, keeping them in a state of slavery. The Lord raised up a prophet, however, named Moses, who, with his brother Aaron, came before the king of Egypt and asked leave for the children of Israel to go away into the wilderness to worship God. This the king would not permit, and the Lord, through Moses and Aaron, did many wonderful things, bringing terrible plagues upon the people of Egypt, until their king allowed Moses to lead the Hebrews away. After they had gone some little time, the wicked king was angry with himself for what he had done, and he got together his soldiers with their horses, their carriages of war, called chariots, and their arms, and pursued the Hebrews to bring them back to slavery. When the children of Israel saw their former masters pursuing them, they were very much afraid, being close by the Red Sea, and having no way to escape, as they thought. But the Lord, through Moses, made the water of the Red Sea separate, and opened a path through on the bottom of the sea, by which they passed over to the other side. The king of Egypt and his soldiers followed them, to overtake them. But when they were in the middle of the sea, and the children of Israel had all got over, the Lord caused the water to return to its former place, drowning the king of Egypt and all his men, while the people of God were thus delivered by the power of the Almighty. Yeah, it's a pretty commonly known story, yeah. They didn't talk about the plagues. I thought that's interesting. They just jumped right over it, because that was kind of a big part of the story, you know? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty well known, and I think it's appropriate to put in a periodical, led by the church, so religious periodical. All right, obedience to parents. Our little readers, we expect, have all heard about Abraham, who, for his goodness, was called the friend of God. He had a son whom he loved very much, of the name of Isaac. 3 angels of God came and visited Abraham and told him and his wife Sarah, before Isaac was born, that they should have a son. When this child grew to be some size, God commanded Abraham to take the boy and go off to a distant mountain and offer him up as a burnt offering, that is, to kill him and burn his body with fire on an altar. Was not this a strange commandment for God to give his servant? I 100% agree. That's always been a weird story to me. He wanted to try Abraham and find out whether he would do as the Lord told him rather than to do what he himself thought to be right. Abraham did not stop to ask the Lord what he meant by telling him to kill his son which he had given him, and whom he had told him would live to be a mighty man and the head of a great family. He took Isaac and 2 young men with him and started for the mountain where he supposed he had to kill and burn his boy. When he came in sight of the place, he told the 2 young men to stop with the ass which they had, and he and Isaac would go to the place and worship. Then Abraham took the wood which he had prepared to make the fire with, and laid it on Isaac for him to carry, and he himself took some fire with the knife, and they started. Up to this time Abraham had not told Isaac what he had intended to do, and Isaac, when he saw that his father had no lamb to offer up, asked him where the lamb was for the burnt offering. Abraham answered him that God would himself provide a burnt offering. When they reached the place, Abraham built an altar of stones, and he laid the wood upon it, and took Isaac his son, and bound him, and laid him on top of the wood. He then took the knife to kill his boy, but at that moment the angel of the Lord called to him out of heaven. And when Abraham heard his name called, he answered. And the Lord told him not to hurt his boy, nor do anything to him. And he told Abraham that he now knew he feared God, seeing that he would not withhold his son, whom he loved so much, from him. Abraham afterwards found a ram fast in a thicket by the horns, and he took and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. No matter what God asked Abraham to do, he always did it. Therefore God loved Abraham very much, and called him his friend. And God loved Isaac too, for he was obedient like his father. The Bible does not tell us how old Isaac was when his father took him to the mountain to offer him up, but Josephus, a Jewish historian, tells us that he was 25 years old at the time. The Bible says he was so large that he could carry the wood for his father. I was actually going to point that out. Yeah. Like, if he's carrying the wood, he's got to be, like, fully grown guy. Like, we're not talking about an 8-year-old boy here. Yeah. There are many boys in these days who disobey their fathers and will not do as they tell them in very little things. But this was not the case with Isaac. He did not want to run away from his father, neither did he fight or resist him when he laid him on the altar to kill him. Abraham was his father, and if he wanted to kill him, he would submit to his wishes and obey him. Josephus says that when Abraham told Isaac that God had commanded him to kill him, Isaac said that if God had not commanded his father, and he himself had wished to kill him, that it would have been the same, and he would have submitted to his father. This is the feeling which every boy who has such a father as Abraham was should always have towards his father. Such a father would never ask his boy to do anything that the Lord would not be pleased with. But when a wicked parent tells a child to do a thing which God has forbidden, the child should obey God, for he is the great parent of all. This commandment was not given to Abraham to punish him, but to try him, and it also tried Isaac. But God always opens the way for those who are obedient to him and put their trust in him, to escape from every trial and affliction. Our young readers can find the story of Isaac by turning to their Bibles in the 22nd chapter of the book of Genesis. Children, God has made great promises to you if you obey your parents. You have good parents who love you and who do all they can for you. Do not grieve them by disobeying them. Isaac is an example of obedience which you ought to follow. One of the commandments which God gave to Israel was, Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. A curse was pronounced by the Lord upon all children who treated their father and mother lightly. I find this story very interesting, but it's got so many issues, doesn't it? Because I have heard many stories of people who felt as Abraham did and killed their children because of it, and it was really a delusion as opposed to a commandment. So I feel like this kind of story is very dangerous to pass on, and we still talk about it, and it kind of bothers me that we talk about it. I do also appreciate the fact that they point out that Isaac was not a small child. Okay, so anyone who has the feeling that they should kill their small child because they want to be like Abraham, that's 100% not what Abraham did. And also pointing out that Isaac also had to have great faith to trust that this was the right thing, considering that he was an adult at the time, and Abraham could not possibly have overpowered him, being 80 plus years older than him, at least. I don't know exactly how much older, but like, he was much, much older than him. And there's no way that 80, 90, 100-year-old person could have overpowered the 25-year-old. There's no way. And so when you think about that it was actually Isaac's faith that was greater, do you not think? I'm just asking, I'm throwing this out into the universe of having enough faith to allow yourself to be tied up and placed on an altar to be burned. I feel like actually takes more faith than tying someone else up and putting them on an altar to be burned. I'm just saying. I'm throwing that in the universe. What do you think? Put your comments down below. This is one of those Bible stories I don't really like because of what it encourages other people to do. And I feel like it's very dangerous to say, look, God required this of me, when it's, the next person who has that feeling is wrong. You know what I mean? Anyways, I will move on from that, but there's my 2 cents on that question. So yeah, well, I think we should admire Isaac's faith more than Abraham's in this point. And I think that he's very underrated in this story. All right. March. March is the 3rd month in the year, though in the Roman year, as well as in the English ecclesiastical calendar, which was used until the year 1752, it was the 1st month, and the legal year commenced on the 25th of the month. It received the name of Martius by the Romans, and from Mars, the reputed father of their nation, who was also the god of war. Its present name is derived from Martius, the Roman name. The Anglo-Saxons, from whom a great portion of the inhabitants of the United States are descended, gave this month the name of Hildmonath, which means stormy month. Okay. How did we get to March then? I didn't quite follow the logic there. The etymology. But interesting, its legal year commenced on the 25th of the month. Is that not, correct me if I'm wrong, the spring equinox, or very close to it at any rate, which would mean that they considered a year starting on the spring equinox and then commencing to the following spring equinox, yes? Interesting that they chose that. I guess it is kind of the, new beginnings, let's start over, let's plant, it's springtime, yeah? things are getting warmer. I kind of get it, but yeah. Today, our new year is much, much closer to the winter solstice than it is the spring equinox, so I think it's interesting that they didn't, which one do you choose? I guess, like spring equinox, I could see. Anyways, moving on. Voices from nature, the wind. The wind is the most changeable in disposition of anything we know. Sometimes he very obligingly cools off the heated brow of the weary traveler on a hot summer day, and in the next minute throws sand into his eyes, or he is tearing along the valley, throwing up the dust like a mad bull, or driving the clouds before him as a dog does a flock of sheep. We know not where he comes from, nor where he is rushing to. I really think it's interesting that this is gendered. Wind is apparently male. Like he is rushing to. He makes his appearance from all points of the compass. Sometimes he is wished for by the people and will not stir, and then again, when nobody wants him, he howls around the house, rattles on doors and windows, shakes the trees, takes off boys' caps, and sends them dancing along the road. Nobody can stop him or change him. He seems to have his own way, obedient only to the word of him who makes the winds, the angels, and the lightnings to be his servants. Air is so fine a substance that the least cause can put it in motion. A boy whistles, and he causes a current of air. A girl fans herself and forces the air to move. When the wind is very gentle, it is called a breeze, which moves along with the swiftness of a fast horse. Poets call it when rustling through the branches of the old oak tree or playing with the leaves of a rose, a zephyr. It is called a wind when it goes from 50 to 60 miles an hour. Hurricanes, tornadoes, and cyclones, however, rage furiously along with a velocity of 100 to 150 miles an hour, tearing down everything in their mad career. The West India Islands, Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, and Cape Horn are the points in America most subject to hurricanes. But a hurricane in all its terrible grandeur, accompanied by thunder and lightning, can only be witnessed on mid-ocean, where it raises the waves mountain high. Can only be witnessed on mid-ocean? That's 100% not true. Weird, very strange statement there. The roaring, shrieking, howling, and whistling of the wind drown the human voice, and men bend down in terror before the awful majesty of nature. You children have all seen whirlwinds carrying the dust high up to the clouds. They are caused by two winds meeting in opposite directions, and several learned men in modern times maintain that all hurricanes are nothing but the same kind of whirlwinds, only much larger. That is, they all have the form of a spinning top. It is said also that the more furious a hurricane is, over a less extent of country does it spread itself. There is a wind in the great desert Sahara in Africa which is called the Simum, or poisonous wind, which is so intensely hot and dry that a tumbler full of water will be dry in half an hour if exposed to it. Flowers die, the leaves of the trees turn yellow in a few hours, and whole companies of travelers often perish when overtaken by such a wind on the open sand plain, their tongues turning black within their mouths, and their blood almost literally drying up in their bodies. That same wind in a milder form, though, is known in Italy by the name of sirocco, and in Switzerland as the Föhn. Alright, Föhn actually is the same word that they use today for hairdryer. So I am sure that that is related. But if that actually is the word for like a soft, warm wind, I think that's funny. Alright, every man who has a windmill likes to build his mill in the side of the valley where he can have the benefit of the valley wind that commences to come from the valley every afternoon as soon as the sun has left, but is still shining upon the surrounding country. Sailors prefer going to sea in the evening, being taken out by the land wind and running into port in the morning aided by the sea wind. Certain kinds of wind blow in the spring and fall in tropical regions, which are called the trade winds, that are made use of by ships in reaching their destination faster. They keep blowing in certain directions. Their courses in many portions of the earth are fully understood, for they are produced by the motion of our earth and the influence of the heat of the sun. These winds are called in the East Indies the monsoon. Winds carry the seeds of plants great distances and are a means in the hands of the Creator to adorn every portion of the earth with vegetation. In the Pacific Ocean, it sometimes happens that there is no wind stirring for a long time. and then ships stand still as if frozen in ice, which has often proved fatal to the man on board, they having died for want of fresh water and food. When the wind blows in winter, we feel the cold keener than when it is still. Every woman knows that wind dries the clothes quicker. The aeolian harp is a contrivance placed in the walls of garden houses in some countries close to the roof, with several different strings, by which the wind in blowing across them produces such moaning and mournful sounds that nervous persons have been known to burst into tears. When the Holy Ghost was poured out upon the first 12 apostles in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, a noise shook the house wherein they sat like a powerful wind. From all these, my young friends, you can see that winds are some of those manifold agencies in nature which our Heavenly Father employs in enlivening, beautifying, purifying, and adorning the earth, and may we learn to listen to them as passing messengers of the great King, telling us that they have to perform their work on mountain tops or in the valleys, in the heat of the noonday sun, or in the winter's cold, by day or by night. Are we not servants to him, yet worth far more in his eyes? Should we not at least be as obedient as the wind which our Savior commanded from the ship? And it was still in an instant. KGM. I had a feeling this was Carl G. Mazer. The reason why is because he continually referred to circular winds as hurricanes. Hurricanes are a specific kind, yeah? But if it's just wind you're talking about, why aren't they talking about tornadoes, which start over land and do not carry water? Hurricanes start over the water and pick up a lot of water out of the oceans. Also, the way he said that, like, it starts over, like it's only over water, you can only notice it over water, that is 100% not true. Like, it starts over water, and I think that's what he meant, but it's the way he worded it that is not quite accurate. And I think that that was a, non-native speaker issue. Anyways, this was quite interesting, though. That has a lot of interesting things about wind itself. So, all right, moving on. Simple science, sound. In our last article on simple science, the subject treated on was echoes, which are simply sounds returned from a distance to the place where they were made. It was stated there that sounds are carried on the air, and that the air, when struck by a sound, moves in wavelets, or little waves, like water struck by a pebble. These wavelets are called vibrations. Sound is an impression produced upon the ear by these vibrations of the air. If a tuning fork used by musicians is held to the ear or moved rapidly through the air, there is no sound heard, but if it is struck against anything, a sound is immediately heard. The vibration of the fork may be seen and felt by the hand that holds it. The vibrations of the fork are communicated to the air, and as these cease, the sound dies away. If the fork was struck in the receiver of an air pump, which the air had been pumped away from, the vibrations would be seen, but there would be no sound. On the same principle, the strings of a harp or a dulcimer vibrate when struck, and the vibrations are quicker the shorter the string is, and slower when the string is longer. The consequence is that the short strings give high, quick notes, and the long strings give deep, solemn notes. It is calculated that the vibrations of musical strings vary from 32 in a second, which produces a soft, deep bass, to 15,000 in a second, which produces the sharpest treble note. Sounds always go at the same quickness, whether they are high or low, strong or weak. They move at the rate of about 12 miles and 3/4 a minute. The rate at which sound moves can be calculated in different ways. If you stand at a distance from a person who is striking with a large hammer or an axe, you will see, after a blow has been struck, the hammer or axe being lifted for a second stroke before you hear the sound of the former one. The eye sees the stroke when it is given, but the ear does not hear the sound until the vibration of the air which carries the sound reach it. Thus, you could calculate the time it took for the sound to reach you and the distance the man was from you, and find out how long it took the sound to travel that distance. When a cannon or gun is fired, you can see the flash before you hear the sound, for light moves at the rate of about 11 million miles and a half in a minute, which is almost instantaneous. So when you see lightning, you can count how far the thunder is distant, as the thunder will be about a mile away for every 6 seconds that elapses between seeing the flash and hearing the thunder. A simple way of finding this out is by counting the beats of the pulse in your wrist. In an ordinary-sized man, the pulse beats about 60 times a minute. or once in a second, and in a boy of 12 or 14, about 70 times in a minute, so that the thunder would be about a mile off for every 6 beats of a man's pulse, or 7 beats of a boy's of that age. Wood is a good conductor of sound because it is susceptible of considerable vibration. If you scratch a pin at one end of a pole, you can hear the sound by placing your ear at the other end. The earth is also a good conductor of sound, and for this reason, savages, thank you very much for racism. That was totally unnecessary. In many places, and the Indians will lay their ears to the ground to listen for footsteps of men or beasts. You have perhaps seen persons afflicted with deafness use an ear trumpet. If you have, you may have noticed that the end of the trumpet which is in the ear is small, while the other end is very large and very wide. The large end catches a great quantity of air which hears the sound, and it is carried down the trumpet to the small end of the ear, and thus the ear is struck by a larger body of sound than it could be without this or some similar contrivances. Jeez. You had to throw racism into it, just when I was thinking this is a really good, informative article, and then you throw in some racism. Like, why don't you just say people? You know, people sometimes put their ears to the ground to listen for footsteps. That's all you had to say. Ugh, I hate that. Okay, I know that it was a sign of the times, but it's not acceptable. Anyways, this was some very accurate information, and I do appreciate that. I do also appreciate that they knew so much about it. It's kind of surprising to me that this was so very, very accurate. I also think I have to laugh, though. Like, an adult man has an average beat of 60 beats per minute. That is not true. That is resting heart rate, first of all, and also heart rate can vary wildly. So if you are thinking that, like, most people have it around that age, like, that's a very, very healthy person. But if there's anybody with any sort of heart problems or someone who is not very healthy, then it's not going to be anywhere near that, because it can easily double or triple that if you are moving around and doing more exercise. So if you're just randomly, like, let's say you're a farmer working in the field and your heart rate is at 120 beats per minute, which is probably pretty accurate to somebody who's actively working. And then, you see in the distance some distance lightning, and then, you use your pulse to count, how many seconds it is. And then, you see, you hear the thunder, and then you're like, okay, it's about 3 miles away, when it's only 1.5 miles, because your heartbeat is much, much faster than you think it is. You know what I mean? Like, I think that using your heartbeat for that is not a good idea. Dude, use a clock. Yeah? I'm just saying, use a clock. Like, that's really the only accurate way to do it. I know that not everyone had them, but I'm just saying that it's not very, very accurate. Okay. Be ashamed of nothing but your own errors. I like that. If you didn't make a mistake, there's no reason to be ashamed of anything. Like, don't be ashamed of your ears sticking out too much, or whatever it is that, your hair sticking up in the back. Was that caused by an error? Probably not. Might be caused by the wind. It's not an error. Gypsies. Oh, great. Some more racism. I sincerely hope this is respectful. Please be respectful. Oh my gosh. All right. Many of our little readers may have heard of gypsies, and a few may have seen some of them in other countries. They are a strange race, of whose origin nothing certain is known. They live wandering lives and do not mix with any other people. Sure they don't. Okay, they do not like to live in houses, nor to settle down and reside in one place, but they travel about from place to place, living in tents, and obtaining their food and clothing by working as tinkers or traveling tinsmiths, dog fanciers, or anything that does not require hard work nor confine them to one place. They pilfer and steal a great deal, and that's definitely not respectful. While their women make money by pretending to tell fortunes, singing ballads, selling baskets, stealing, and in other similar ways. They do not like the house dwellers, as they call those who live in houses, and think that it is right to rob and cheat them, which is very wrong. They do not like to obey any laws, only their own customs, and while they can speak a language of the country where they live, they have a language of their own, which they call the Romany. A great many opinions are entertained concerning their origin and where they originally came from. They are called gypsies because it was believed at one time that they came from Egypt. Oh, really? Really? I did not know that. From Egypt, gypsies. Okay. I can kind of see it, but I did not know that. An opinion which they encouraged themselves. They are called Zingari in Italy and Gitanos in Spain. Many people think that they came originally from Hindustan in India, but there is no evidence that they did so other than their brown olive color and a certain similarity between the gypsy language and the language of the Hindustan. They are found in Europe, Asia, and Africa, and everywhere their manner of life is the same, strolling about as vagrants, stealing, robbing, and pretending to tell fortunes. In England, they can be often seen, as our illustration represents, camped in some nice green lane under the foliage of a shady tree in summer, or on a common, much as the Indians do who camp about their settlements, gathered in groups, or wandering about by single families, but never marrying outside of their own people. During all seasons of the year they live in their little tents. They are indeed a strange and peculiar race of vagabonds. This is horribly racist. Horribly racist. I apologize for the horrible racism, and I apologize to anybody who is from any sort of culture that is similar to this. I'm not even going to call it that. I think they're called Romani, yeah? Like the Romani I have heard. I do very much apologize to anyone of Romani descent or who associate themselves with the Romani culture. This is awful. This is awful. And I am so sorry that people used to think this way. I sincerely hope that we have changed our opinions today, people. These are human beings and they are people like any other. Their culture may be different from ours, but I don't think stealing is part of anyone's culture. I hate that. Okay. So let's move on from racism to sexism. Okay, word to the boys. Boys, did you ever think that this great world with all its wealth and woe, with all its mines and mountains, its oceans, seas and rivers, with all its shipping, railroads, and magnetic telegraphs, with all its millions of men and all the science and progress of ages, will soon be given over to the hands of the boys of the present age? It will be so. Believe it, and look abroad upon your inheritance and get ready to enter upon your possessions. Okay, it wasn't as sexist as I thought it would be, but it is patriarchal, yeah? Like, of course, you don't tell the girls this. Only the boys are going to inherit the earth. Ugh. All right. But it's just that, rising generation, you are going to be the next adults. Remember that. A hasty temper. Strive hard to subdue a hasty temper. Anger will come, but resist it stoutly. A spark will set a house on fire. A fit of passion may give you cause to mourn all the days of your life. Never revenge an injury. That is very good advice. Yeah, keep your temper. He that revenges knows no rest. The meek possess a peaceful breast. I think it's weird they have the apostrophe. All right. Preserve your papers. We hope that our little readers will be very careful with their papers and not dirty or tear them, but keep them smooth. And when the year is ended, they can have them stitched together or bound into a book. These papers can be read a number of times and still be interesting, and if you keep them, your little brothers and sisters who cannot read them now will be glad to have them when they are able to read. We know some little children who take the instructor and who, after reading them very carefully, them away in a newspaper to keep them nice and clean. Is it not a newspaper itself? As they have been promised that if they take care of them, their parents will have them bound for them when the volume is complete. The back numbers of the Juvenile Instructor can be supplied to persons wishing to subscribe. What I like about this is that this is basically the entire reason why I'm able to read them now. Like whoever, the version that got scanned in was very well kept and preserved. And if it hadn't been, I wouldn't have been able to read it as a PDF. Yeah? So thank you very much for whoever followed this advice. All right, what I'd love to see. I love to see a child when playing with brother or sister always gentle and kind. I love to see a child when sent on an errand immediately start and promptly perform the duty and then at once return home. I love to see a child when sent to school not loiter by the way, but reach the schoolroom at the time the teacher enters. Industry, economy, and prudence are the sure forerunners of success. They create the admirable combination of powers in one which always conduces to eventful prosperity. There is a closer connection between good sense and good nature than is generally supposed. Frequently review your conduct and note your failings. Humility is a flower that prospers most when planted on the rich soil of a noble and great mind. Fire is a good servant, but a hard master. Master your passions, and they will serve you. Good children never insult persons who pass along the street. They are obedient to their parents and teachers and kind to their playmates. They do not quarrel or fight. Bad boys do these things. Once again, the sexism, yes? He started out by talking about children, and then at the end it was boys. That's so annoying. I'm sorry. Good children never insult persons. They are obedient to parents, kind to their playmates. They do not quarrel or fight. Bad boys do these things. Why don't they say bad children? I do not understand that at all. They're also shaming people who ever get in fights, which sometimes there are good reasons. All right, moving on. The Riddler, Charade, by Andrew A. Cahoon. I am composed of 18 letters. My 1, 2, 11, 12, 6, 15, 4 is an attribute of God. My 7, 17, 3, 8 is our duty to God. My 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 6, 17, 5 is what all persons need. My whole is black and white, amusing, instructive, and should be in every family circle in Utah. It's Juvenile Instructor, isn't it? Anyway, I don't know, but that's just a really quick guess, just because the last one. I usually try not to guess, and I let you people guess, because that's more fun, is it not? So, but that just immediately struck me. I'm like, oh, that's what it is, isn't it? Anyways, all right, that's enough. So this one had a lot of racism. I'm a little sad about that. So the poor Romanis, as well as the Native Americans, were very badly spoken of. Simple Science Sound, that was really interesting, except you didn't have to throw racism into it. The Wind, that was also very informative. Not quite accurate, but pretty close. March, yeah, sure, it wasn't as informative as the other ones. I felt January and February was much more, thoroughly researched. Obedience to Parents, yeah, I mean, it's a typical do what you're told thing. Talking about Moses, they only told half the story, you know? Swiss Family, that was really weird too. It was also slightly racist in the other direction, yeah? It's like the Swiss are the most amazing people ever. I don't know. Little Folks' Prayers, sure. Story of Atlas was interesting. Learned a bunch of stuff I didn't know, as well as making big mistakes myself. Joseph Smith the Prophet, and that was skirting on things that I hadn't known before that or not in Joseph Smith history. And then the Stars, not quite accurate. So I feel like this one's a little less accurate than it has been in the past, as well as quite much more racist. I find that a little bit concerning, but I'm so sorry to anyone if anyone was offended. I promise this is not my view of things. I don't think this way at all, okay, when it comes to the racism. Anyway, I feel like with our modern eyes and our modern perspective, we can look back and say this was racism and sexism. And back then, I don't think anybody thought they were being racist. I think if you had asked them, are you a racist person, they would have said no. I really think that. So it's interesting. I'm really glad that we have come farther from that we've come away from that, and we're no longer thinking that we're good people and thinking the right way when we're saying racist things. At least I hope most people don't think that. Anyways, I know racism still exists, obviously. And I know some of these stereotypes still exist. And I'm really sorry about that. I wish they didn't. Anyways, but I hope you enjoyed that anyway, even if it's not quite accurate this time. So hopefully it will improve in the coming issues. So, but if you did like it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.